So when we talk about a business cycle, we're going to break it down into 4 phases. All right. We really think of a business cycle in terms of a wave, just like in physics. You've got a peak, trough, downturns, and upturns. All right. So let's take a look at this. A recession. Well, let's come back to that one for a second. All right, we'll come back to that. Just a second. So, first of all, we talk about this right here. This is called the secular growth trend, or this is the long-run components of GDP. So when we talk about business cycles, generally what we want to do is subtract off that long-run component. So we essentially turn this on its side so that it's nice and flat. Then we have this wave that goes around this long-run component or secular trend. All right, secular refers to the French word for 100. All right, so when we take a look at this, the first thing you can see is, well, let's go back here for a second. We have what's called the upturn. All right, this is where the economy is growing. All right, and we can really divide this into two parts here. Here where the growth rate is increasing, but still below the secular trend, and then here where it's increasing and above. So we can think of this as an expansion. Sorry about that. And we can think of this as recovery. All right. So if we looked before here, there'd be some kind of a trough here, and we would have been in a recession. And now we're recovering. And then we hit the upturn where we're actually expanding. Then we hit the peak. All right. The peak is the top of the business cycle. All right, so when we hit the peak, everything is as good as it's going to be, and then we start the downturn. So now we have this downturn phase where we're losing economic growth. The economy is not growing as fast. But in this phase right here, we can call this, all right, the downturn or the contraction. Didn't spell that right, but you get the idea. Economic contraction. And then we can come right here, talk about that as recession. All right. I know this is getting messy, but that's okay. All right. Then we have the trough. The trough is the end of the recession. All right, and I'm going to erase my stuff so I don't get quite so messy. All right, the trough here, that's where we end the recession. But notice, what's the difference between right here and right here? The difference is simple. Here, the economy sucks and it's getting worse. Here, the economy sucks and it's getting better. So there's a lot of confusion over, when we end a recession, all right, what's the trough of the business cycle? Oftentimes people will say, well, the recession is over. It's over? Well, wait a minute. Unemployment's still at 8.2%. How can you tell me the recession is over when I have unemployment so high? Well, because just because the recession ends and we've entered the recovery phase doesn't mean we've hit the expansion phase. So this phase right here where we're recovering from the recession, which is where our economy is at currently, we see things getting better, but things could still be pretty bad. We could still have pretty high unemployment. The recession doesn't just turn off. The business cycle doesn't just flip back and forth between expansion and contraction. It moves back and forth. So here we have to recover, and then we hit our expansion. All right, go back up to a peak, and then we have a downturn and trough, an upturn, and this just keeps going over and over and over again. It just cycles through it. All right, sometimes we have what's called a boom or a really, really high peak. All right, when we have a boom, oftentimes that can lead to, yep. Let's go through this. Oh, no, sorry. Sometimes that can also lead to a crash. All right, so really, really wide business cycles. Generally, we don't like that. What we prefer is nice, long, shallow expansions and short, shallow recessions. So something like that, right? As close to this trend as we can get. Why? Because it's easier to predict, all right? There's less uncertainty. We don't have to deal with things like unemployment. We don't have to deal with things like inflation, all right? So why do business cycles occur? Well, to be honest, that's a really good question. Although we can see some data here that shows that, hey, business cycles seem to have gotten better. If we look at the pre-war period, 22 business cycles. Average duration, 50 months. Post-war, 11 business cycles. Average duration, 67 months. So we've added over a year, actually over almost a year and a half to the average duration of a business cycle. And we've cut the number in half. If we take a look at length of the longest cycle is longer, shortest cycle is no less. Average length of expansions have not changed very much, but the length of longest expansion has changed considerably, and the average length of recession is half what it was. So essentially, we're doing what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce the number of business cycles, reduce the severity of recessions, and increase the length of expansions. And so far, it looks like in the pre-war period, that's happened. Again, we call that kind of the Great Moderation, but I don't know. We may have to think about that a little bit. One of the problems that we run into is the latest financial crisis says, hey, maybe we just really got lucky. Because why might this be? This is all really good. This might be because our policy is good. Or it could be that China has drastically changed its economic institutions. It's producing way more cheap goods, and so it supports excess demand on the United States part without having lots of inflation. All right, so minimizing the upside risk of inflation by producing lots of cheap goods. There could be other things, technological improvements, all kinds of stuff could be behind this, or it could be we've just gotten really good at policy. Although I have to say that the financial crisis and our response to the financial crisis has suggested that maybe, we don't quite know exactly what we're doing as much as we thought we did in policy. Particularly the way we allowed this interconnectedness of the financial crisis to basically almost bring the whole system down.